Today's reading is from Matthew 5, verses 13 through 16. You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. The word of the Lord.
There we go. I think you are expecting a sermon today, and there will be a sermon, and the person who's teaching that, leading that, is not me. So for those of you that haven't been here, wow. And that's okay. Glad it's Pastor's Appreciation Month there, so. But we have Marty and Jeanette Windle with us, and Jeanette went out to teach the children. They have had LTC support from the time they started serving as missionaries in 1984. And they first served in Bolivia with the Gospel Missionary Union, which is now Avant, and then in Miami with the Latin American Mission. And then in 2006, the Windles moved to Pennsylvania, where Marty accepted the position of president of BCMI, and he served in that role until the end of 2022, but he continues to serve the Lord, to represent BCM in North America and internationally, as well as provide leadership and training. And Jeanette is the editor of the BCM World Magazine and continues to serve as consulting editor, trainer, and mentor for developing writers from all over the world. And now Marty and Jeanette reside in Montana near Marty's dad. And I was given from the mission team where we have that. A fun fact about them is that Marty and Jeanette were both missionary kids. And in fact, Jeanette's parents, Bob and Don Archer, were missionaries who were supported by LTCC.
Thank you, Pastor. I now feel fully exposed after you heard all of that stuff. It's a good thing the Lord saw it all before you did and forgave me of some of those trespasses. Announcements are the bane of every speaker and every pastor, and I have two. One from my wife. She said at our estate table, we still have some of her titles left if you're interested. All the proceeds will be going to the Ukraine relief effort. And stop by and look at that. In my mind, if you stop there and would like to receive our prayer letters, please sign up. Used to be an address, now it's an email address. So if you don't have email, talk to one of your friends that does and get a copy from them. The other announcement is from me. I've been serving as the president for a number of years. And as people get older and you transition to new and vibrant leadership as you enter the next chapter of a mission's life, one of the things that's happening is my chief financial officer, CFO, is retiring in about 6 months. So if you know someone who is good with numbers, some CPA, who loves dealing with money in an organization that doesn't have any, who has a heart for missions and is willing to work for the Lord, even if they have to move to Pennsylvania, please let me know. Good. Announcements are done. Now for the fun part. Take your Bible and turn with me, if you would, to the book of Matthew chapter 5. Matthew chapter 5, in the reading this morning, it was talking about us being disciples of salt and light. When we talk about missions is intentional discipleship, intentional evangelism for all age groups. And that is our focus in BCM, Bible-Centered Ministries, which used to be the Bible Club movement. That we believe that God can reach people from every tongue, every nation, and every age. We specialize on children ages 4 to 14. We call that the golden age of salvation, because everyone who is ever accepting the Lord in this lifetime, 80% of those people, I won't do that, my fingers don't work, 8 out of 10 will do it in that time period. So if you accepted the Lord outside that time period, you got in on overtime if you're talking about football, but you're still here. So as we look at that passage, this is the Beatitudes, start off that chapter. It's a Sermon on the Mount where Christ talks about what his plan is while he's here during his time on earth in those 3 years of ministry he did before he went to the cross and gave himself for us. And he begins that talk by talking about the life of the believer. Citizenship in the kingdom is what we often talk about when we look at that passage. But when I look at the verses that follow that, 13 through 16 or 17, he just described a disciple where he takes us of children of darkness, children of emptiness, children of lostness in those first Beatitudes, and he gives us things like the kingdom of God. He gives us comfort. He gives us an inheritance in him. We have talked off and on in our time together over this weekend about the current situation in the Ukraine. Tima Nokin is our Ukrainian director. Tima, of course, is Ukrainian, as most of our national directors are from the country of their birth. Tima is someone that I have known for quite a few years. And Tima was not the national director before what happened in the Ukraine currently happened. You see, today marks the 954th day, yes, 2 years, 8 months, and 9 days since Russia invaded Ukraine in an escalation of the Russo-Ukrainian war that started on February 20th, 2022. It's an escalation of what's been happening since 2014. This conflict in Russia now, according to the United Nations, has released the greatest movement of refugees since World War II. Roughly 1/3 of the Ukrainian population is reportedly displaced, with 13.9, almost 14 million people displaced in that country. About 6.5 million of those are refugees, and over 5 million of them have left the country because they have no place else to return. Some of the estimates there is that 4 million out of the 5 are children. Children not old enough to be recruited to fight in the war because all the men of recruitable age were not allowed to leave the country. So their mothers and sometimes their aunties took them and escaped the country. They got to the border, and I mentioned this a couple times in some of our Q&A. Those people got to the border fleeing danger, fleeing conflict, fleeing death. And there were humanitarian aid people at the border to help them there, lined up in Poland and other countries, which they did. But there was also the human trafficking group of individuals who were there, and they saw these vulnerable people and they promised them a better life and quickly swept them into that human trafficking world. The reason I know that is because I talk to Tima at least once or twice a week. We have encrypted communication that goes back and forth. So he tells me where he's at. He tells me what he's doing. He tells me if things are going well or if he's rested. And he shares every day what happens there. He planned, when he became the national director 54 days before the conflict began, I saw his ministry plan, Bible clubs, Christian release time in the schools, camps, ministry to handicapped people and to deaf people. Because we are focused on reaching children and strengthening the church. We're focused on making disciples after we lead people to that sweet place where they hear the voice of Jesus Christ and accept him into their heart. His plan had to change. His vision of reaching children and strengthening the church continues, but we do ministry now with our 20 missionaries there, not only with Bible clubs, orphan ministry, and church ministry, but also humanitarian aid. We had an orphanage in Marty Windle. Well, we evacuated busloads of children to Germany. Shortly after that, 4 of the men who had refugees in that orphanage were killed in a missile attack when a missile hit their car. The orphanage was destroyed and razed to the ground. We managed to get it rebuilt a little bit, and now it's filled with those transients who are looking for a place to live and a way to survive one more day. As I look at Tima's ministry, and how the context of his ministry from a peaceful society to one filled with conflict changes the things that he has to do to stay alive, changes the things he has to do to survive, and help other people to do the same thing. I look at what is God's definition of a disciple. You see, we often think of discipleship as the things we do. We maybe go through the Navigator's material, which is really good stuff. It might be considered old because the first verses were King James Version, but hey, I still understand King James, even though he's been pushing up daisies for years. But when we look at discipleship, discipleship is not so much the matter of doing as it is the matter of being. During the Sermon on the Mount, after Jesus defines the essence of genuine discipleship in the first 7 Beatitudes, describing our spiritual journey to become a disciple, a Christ follower, we start as empty, nothing, a sinful, searching people without hope. Until we are rescued by Christ, in whom we are comforted, we receive an inheritance, and we are finally filled with righteousness and mercy, and given the hope that is within a pure heart that we will see God. You see, we live out his design for our lives as a community of light in a world of darkness. This is a community of light seated here this morning. We live in a world of darkness. We should expect the world of darkness not to understand us. We should expect the things that happen in darkness to resist the revealing power of light when it shines on them. We should expect, as we live out his design of our lives in a community of light in this world of darkness, that we will impact the world even though we are rejected by them. Christ here, if you look at the beginning of chapter 5, he was on the Sea of Galilee. Actually, it looks more like Flathead Lake to me. But he was on the Sea of Galilee. He came in and he walked up from the shore and sat down on a mountainside and began to teach them. And then it goes into his discussion there, his mountain devotional about what's going to happen. And in order to try and draw the people in, he used 2 metaphors from daily life, salt and light. Things that they dealt with every day, things that they dealt with every evening. And he tried to demonstrate there that he is calling us disciples of salt and disciples of light. Are you a disciple of salt and light this morning? Are you salt in your community? Do you message the light of the gospel to the world around you? There was a gentleman in the 18th century, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. And if you speak German, I ask for your forgiveness now because I just massacred that last name. But von Goethe was a poet. He was a scientist. He was a philosopher. And he was also a believer. So as he studied science, he tried to put his findings into prose and into poetry to explain his faith in Jesus Christ. Not a lot of his writings have survived. Some of his poems and his fables have. But in one letter that von Goethe wrote to his friend Wilhelm, he says, What is our world like without love? It's like a magic lantern without a light. Now, let me stop because some of you immediately went to Aladdin. Or somebody's polishing that light, and a guy who didn't have enough preservatives and turned green pops out. We have overheads, we have projectors now. The magic lamp he was talking about was an old mechanism. It was a regular lamp with the four sides, and they would take pictures of things and replace the glass with those images. And then they would put a candle in there, and it would project that light on the walls of the house. Now, that was cutting-edge technology, one that is lost on us today. But Van Gogh said, it's like a magic lantern, but a lantern that does not have a light. The moment you bring that little light into it, the brightest picture shines on your white wall. And if it were no more than that, only passing phantoms, still it always makes us happy when we stand there like innocent boys, enraptured by their wondrous visions. Are they phantoms, Wilhelm, if they make us happy? In another one of his literary tales, Van Gogh talks about an old man who's wandering through the dark forest, and he comes along the river, and he's carrying a silver lamp. And when he walks into a fisherman's hut, the stone hut with the small door and the thatched roof, and it's pitch dark in there, he lights the silver lamp, and the room turns into a silver altar of worship. What Van Gogh was trying to explain is that the Beatitudes here, when they are inserted into the Christian life, change the Christian life. They are qualities of heavenly inhabitants that we demonstrate, but we only demonstrate them when Jesus Christ, that lamp that sits in that little magic lamp, provides light and shines through those qualities that we have gained by being his disciple and become salt in the community where we live. So let me ask you the first question. Are you a disciple of salt? Verse 13, you are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? And is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. Reverend Kobe Vijona is one of our BCM missionaries in South Africa. He is a chaplain. He goes every day to the hospitals to minister to the patients, to minister to the staff. In his words, he describes his ministry as bringing church to the hospital, where most hospital staff work demanding hours while patients can't leave to attend services. Many are in critical condition, desperately needing hope, as families watch loved ones enter into eternity or face serious diagnoses. They too need support through their trauma. Since the church building is inaccessible to these people, Kobe has committed to bringing the church body to them. He says, every day is a clean canvas. I go to present the Lord. There are new events, new patients, different staff on call, new family members, each with unique circumstances. I think we can identify with that. Everyone he meets responds differently to the gospel. You see, not everybody welcomes salt and light into their life. Delarice was one such patient. Only 29 years old, she arrived at the hospital seriously ill with many complications. Though she was a devout Hindu, no Hindu priest ever visited her. Through the witness of Kobe and his team, she began to see the reality of who Jesus was. She would ask them to be with her on her most painful days when the hospital staff would have to perform various procedures. Kobe would stay with her, praying for her and reading the Bible to keep her calm. During her stay there, Delarice turned 30. A celebration was held for her in the hospital cafeteria. Their food isn't any better than hospital food here, so I don't know how you could have a party, but they did. That's a rabbit tail. You could not put that in your notes. The celebration was held for her, and her Hindu family insisted that Kobe and his team attend. and asked Kobe to share the devotional. As hospital staff, friends, and family packed the cafeteria, Kobe openly presented the gospel of Jesus Christ. The doctors and hospital staff began to notice the difference in Dolorice's demeanor when Kobe and the team were with her, which contributed to the good relationship that Kobe built with the staff. After 9 months, Dolorice passed away. 2 weeks before she died, however, she gave her life to Jesus Christ. Kobe said it started with one visit. A disciple of salt and a disciple of light making one visit to a person who is dead in their trespasses and sin and living without hope in darkness. He says people like Dolorice make this kind of ministry worthwhile. Now, you're a disciple of salt. Those chemists that are present here know what the chemical composition of salt is. What is it? NaCl, or sodium and chloride. Now, if you have sodium by itself, what happens when you expose it to air? It bursts into flame. So you have to keep sodium with some type of a covering, kerosene or something else, so that it doesn't explode and cause harm to everyone else. What is chloride or chlorine? It's a deadly poison. You combine something that's got this flaming ability ready to explode at any moment with something that's deadly, and it becomes that inert composition that we call salt. Salt is critical for life. We have known this for years. The people that Jesus was talking to knew that. Salt was so important in that time period that they often used it to pay part of the salary of some of the people who worked for the military. That word for salt is actually where we got part of our word for salary. So he calls us the salt of the world. In its pure form, however, salt is clear and salt is odorless. It's hygroscopic, which means that it absorbs the water from the air around us and the humidity, and often dissolves in water. So we're called the salt of the world. Salt is we're called the salt of the world. The salt of our community is actually what it says. You're the salt of the earth. That word "ges" used there gives us our word geography. Jesus said, you are the salt in your community. You are called to live in wholesomeness in your community. Our role of wholesomeness is something that was clearly understood as believers when many people who weren't Christians throughout history wanted Christians to be present so that their community would stabilize. In rabbinical literature, that salt was also used for a role called for a metaphor for wisdom. Your role as a disciple of light, of salt, and my role as a disciple of salt is to live a life of wholesomeness, a role of Christ's living values in the community in which we live. We do not have the role of imposing our Christian values upon the people who walk in darkness around us. Throughout the history of the church, we have seen it happen from time to time. When a conquering force came in, they brought their religious beliefs with them. In Latin America, when the Spaniards came in, they brought the Roman Catholic Church. People were herded together, like in Bolivia, where I were at. They were asked to either convert or be slaughtered. And if they decided to convert, the priest would say, blessing on them, sprinkle holy water, and they instantly became children of the Catholic Church. But what happened is their belief system didn't change. So like in Bolivia, where we had a lot of Incas, which are now the Quechuas that I worked with for some years, they have a belief in Mother Earth and Father Son. Mother Earth is the giver of life, and Father Son is the one who blesses. They still believed that when they went to Mass. They changed the name from Mother Earth to Mother Mary. They changed the name for Father Son to the Apostle Paul. And so they had a syncretism that moved through because Christian values were imposed on them, and they had the substance of the value, or they had the structure of the value, but not the substance. You and I, as disciples of salt, have to live the substance of Christianity so that the world can see us and change because of the witness, not of our words, but the witness of our life. I know I just raised a little red flag in a couple people's head. I won't say what it is. We'll get to it in a minute. Our lives will influence the social fabric of our community. But we have a little trouble for you chemists, because it says, what happens when the salt loses its saltiness? And we know that that combination of salt cannot lose its saltiness because of the type of a chemical composition it is. So we say, well, was Christ wrong? Well, first of all, it's a metaphor. You can't carry it too far. But chemically, he was not wrong. You see, the salt that they had in those time periods came from the sea salt scale that came from the edge of the ocean. Or it was mined. They'd mined salt almost 6,000 years by the time Christ was spoken. And what happens is if you leave that salt out, because of its hygroscopic nature, the salt eventually leaches out of the minerals that it was being carried in, and you have the mineral context there, you have the structure, but the salt is gone. See, the gospel of Jesus Christ is truth. Salt is often a metaphor for truth. Truth does not change because the witness of truth becomes useless. So he says, what happens when you lose your saltiness? What that means is our relevance, the relevance of our voice to speak truth is no longer listened to by the community in which we live. That's why the church is often declared as useless in modern society today. In postmodern Europe, when I go to visit, there are many people there that believe that the church is a pox on humanity and should be removed before it completely damages modern society. What happened was the church was so busy voicing their beliefs and imposing their beliefs on the community around them that the truth that should have changed them on the inside had melted away for one reason or another, and they were left with a voice, they were left with the structure, they were left without the substance of the relationship with Jesus Christ. And we call that empty religion. When we lose our wholesomeness in our community, we lose our value and are considered irrelevant and trampled by men. You see, quality of character validates the veracity of the messenger. Let me say that again. The quality of our character, of our being transformed as disciples of light, validates the veracity of the messenger. When our value as salt is gone, we are discredited both personally as individuals and publicly as messengers of light. But when you are a disciple of salt, when I am a disciple of salt, we are undisguisedly and inevitably a disciple of light. Because God has transformed us so that we are disciples of salt, living with Him in us. The truth exudes through our pores, and it cannot be hidden. And He calls us in that state a disciple of light. Verse 14, you are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Where Christ was giving this message there on the Sea of Galilee, I've stood in what they think is a traditional location. The water is behind him, and there are little hillsides all around that spot where he came ashore. On those hillsides are little houses and little villages that group together. And as the dusk comes in, you start to see light appearing in each one of those little houses. He says, you are the light of the world. A town built on a head cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. Go with me for a minute to the Philippines. There's a story during the pandemic in the Philippines, actually stories all over, and one of our missionaries there gave us the following example of how Christ's love was experienced in the people in their community. She said, we all have our own stories to tell, but God's love story is one that our world desperately needs to hear. During the global pandemic, online purchasing led to increased demands for home delivery throughout the Philippines. Delivery riders became a valued group of frontliners, enduring discomfort and the risk of COVID-19 exposure as they transported needed goods day and night through sunshine and rain. Pay was typically minimum wage. With no health or other benefit employees, there were long hours and difficult working conditions. What happened was everybody was confined to their homes or small groups of under 10 people. There was a group of teenagers, high school kids, and early college when God put it on their heart to reach out in Metro Manila, to reach out to some of these riders. After fervent prayers, planning, and preparation, the group decided they would reach out to 15 riders and present them with the gospel of Jesus Christ. After fervent prayers, planning, and preparation, the group waited in various homes for the riders to deliver their orders. As each arrived, they were invited to participate in a moment of prayer and sharing God's love story. Amazingly, not one of the 15 declined. After sharing the gospel, the young people prayed with each rider, then handed them a bag of groceries to take home. Some of those riders said, the first one said he'd been desperately needing a job because his daughter was in the hospital and he had no way to pay the bill. Another rider said his wife was about to give birth, not his wife, his girlfriend was about to give birth to their first child, and he had no idea with all this uncertainty how he would provide for that child. Another one said, I've been running away from God during this pandemic as the challenges are overwhelming and God's presence seems so far away. But after seeing your love for a writer like me, I can't deny that God is touching my life now. I will look for a Christian church so I can grow in faith. 15 riders heard God's love story that day. 14 surrendered their lives to Jesus, and one rededicated his life to Christ. As to these young people who echoed God's love story, they were overflowing with the joy at the end of the day, and their lives challenged others to do the same. We are the light of the world. When I was in Israel, I've been there a couple times with teams. We take people to see and get a three-dimensional view of the Bible. One of the things we saw was the lamp that they used during the times of Christ. That lamp was an open-faced lamp. It looked like a cupped hand. It had a string or a wick hanging out of it, and it was filled with olive oil. So you would light the wick through the capillary action of the fiber of that string would suck the oil up through and off the end, and the flame would stay at the end of the wick and not get in the dish. Now, how many of you have ever cooked with olive oil? You know that smell? That aromatic, little bit of pungent smell that makes your mouth water? Imagine being in a dark house and someone lights that. You stop thinking about dark and you begin to think about food, glorious food. A vulture friend of mine saying that. But the other thing about those little olive oil lamps is they were messy. The wick would sometimes over-extract oil and it would drip on the table. If somebody was walking by and bumped that thing, it tipped over and the oil went everywhere and the light went out. So Christ, in the example he gave them, says, you are the light of the world set on a hill. It talks about a lamp that's put on a stand so that it can't tip, and it's not having a bowl placed over it. And the reference, of course, he was sitting there on that hillside, and if it was closer to dark, you could begin to see those little lights popping up all around on the hillside around them. As disciples of light, we are a lamp of the light of Jesus Christ. One lamp is good, but 2 lamps is better. One lamp is good, but 5 lamps begins to dominate the darkness and chase it out of the corners of the house. You see, as disciples of salt, we become messengers of light so that the life that we live gives substance to our message and gives us the ability to speak with authority about a way to escape the darkness and to walk in the light. We are the community of light. Our message of light is the communication of our life as salt, disciples of Christ. And I mentioned before, let me say it again, the quality of character validates the veracity of the messenger. When our value of salt is gone, we are discredited both personally and as a group, and publicly as a group of messengers of light. So, our role as a church, because you are the light of the world. That world is cosmos, society, the creation of the fabric of people interrelated with each other. And we're the people that shine light into that fabric of society. Our message of light is a communication of lifestyle, not verbal messaging, because it's salt reflected through our life. Our message of light, however, has the corollary of talking. It's not good enough just to say, oh, I live like a Christian, and they need to extrapolate the fact that I'm different and look for the light. I talked to one gentleman I known for a number of years in a small town of Montana who worked at the sawmill. Let me call him Joe. That's not his real name, but he and the Lord hopefully are talking now. He said, I worked for 26 years in that sawmill and not a single person knew I was a believer. He said, I fit in so well. And he was happy about that. And this little heart of mine that was supposed to shine, sunk. God created you to be a disciple of salt. He created you to live by the standards that He gives us and the life that He provides us. And as that disciple of salt, out of our life as disciples of salt, the fabric of who we are as reborn believers, pops this light and it shines and we talk about that message. And because we live what we're saying, our message is heard. And the result is what? They praise the believer. They exalt the church? No, it says they will praise your Father in heaven when they see your good works. See, disciples of salt and disciples of life have one purpose: to follow Christ and lead other people to Jesus Christ. We talk about missions. That's what it's all about. Crossing the sea does not make you a missionary. Seeing the cross does. We talked about Tima at the beginning. Tima wrote to me at the end of last year, and he said, Dear Marty, today is December 31st, the last day of this year. At that time, it was almost 700 days of full-scale war. Excuse some of what I'm about to read, because Tima is a Ukrainian Russian speaker, and their articles and stuff are different than what we have in English. Today is December 31st, full-scale, cruel, bloody war. Russia continues to destroy our country, continues to destroy our cities. Many cities are completely destroyed. There is nothing left. No house, no people, only devastation. People continue to lose their loved ones or relatives. Thousands of dead, hundreds of thousands killed. Thousands killed with torture. 2 days ago, we had large-scale missile attack. More than 6 cities were shelled. More than 110 missiles were fired. Civilian objects were destroyed. 40 were killed. More than 150 were injured. Critical infrastructure was damaged. We have no electric, we have no heat and winter is upon us. But God takes care of us. This year we have surprisingly warm winter, and we hope so till the end of the year. Often there is no hope, not enough strength, little faith, but there is a hope, and this hope is only in our God. We need your prayerful support to live, to continue to survive, and help those in need of the good news. We continue to serve together and deliver humanitarian aid. This Christmas is a great time to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ, and many people are coming to him. Tima had learned what it was to not only be a disciple of salt, but to also become a disciple of light. You know, as I get old, I get nearsighted and I can't see that clock. So you guys are in extreme danger of missing out. Fear not, I'm almost done. As we think about this passage and look at how God took people from darkness, cleansed their soul, and made them disciples of salt so that they, in their community, so they could be a disciple of light in their society. It begs the question to ask, are we today disciples of salt? Are you and I disciples of salt who live what we believe, and we don't have to worry about having an empty structure because that salt remains pure in us? Or are we one of those peoples that claim to be a believer and the salt has been leached out? Now, there is a way to take salt back to its two natural components. It's a major chemical process, and when it happens, there is heat and fire and light and destruction, but it separates those chemicals. And often as believers, when either we lose the salt or something happens and conflict within the children as disciples of salt ruins that relationship and destroys their standing for the truth, that the community sees that bomb that went off in the body of Christ, and they say, I have no need of this. But if we are a disciple of salt, that salt preserves us. That salt cleanses us. That salt makes us taste a little better, even if we are salty old people. And we become what Christ calls a disciple of light. Are you a disciple of light? Live your faith. Be ready to give reason for the hope that is in you at every moment. You're not converting people to come to church. You're demonstrating how Jesus Christ changes their lives. Let Jesus invite him to church. And when he's inviting, you just back up his invitation. Let me pray for you for a moment before the praise team comes and takes us into the next phase of this morning worship. Our gracious God, our Heavenly Father, you promised that where two or more are gathered in your name, you're there in their midst. You're here with us. Father, in a group this size, there is very likely people who have not yet met you, who do not understand the transformation that happens in the life of a hopeless individual who works and lives in darkness. Father, I would ask that if those type of people are here this morning, that you would touch them. Lead them to relationship where they hear your voice and become disciples of salt and light. And for those of us who are believers, Father, renew our commitment to live what we believe as your children and disciples and be disciples of light. We pray all these things in the name of the Father, his Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Actually, you can go ahead and sit down. So a little change is we have a video from Marty and that we want to show right now about BCM International, and then I will release you right after that. If you would, please stand. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face toward you and give you peace. You are sent.